Jimmy Smith will tell you it's time for Bay Area baseball, past, present, and future. We're back. Bay Area baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko. The host of the show is Tim Haller. And our guest, and I'm going to pronounce this properly if I can, Vasu Vaddiparty.
Exactly like it looks, Ralph. How are you?
All right. Nice to have you in the zone for the first time. Timmy, good to reacquaint week to week.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. How's everyone doing this evening?
Things are fine up in Northern California, and I trust things are the same in Southern California.
All is well in my life, in my world here. I heard you guys had a Chamber of Commerce Day today in the Bay Area.
So that's a good way of putting it. It was kind of nice. There's kind of an open fragrance in the air that made things nice. For those of you out there,
living on the wrong side of the bay, Ralph. I feel bad for you.
I know, but you know, sometimes the wind blows in the right direction. For those of you out there who may not know, sorry. What can I tell you? Vasu, you're in the game of baseball, and may I ask in what?
Very small part of it, Ralph. Very small part of it, guys. I'm just like a backstage guy with announcers with Fox, and I love doing that part of the job because I don't have to be I'm the guy next to the guy, but I get to see a lot of baseball, and I don't have to worry about all the problems that they all have for being on air, especially the criticism
now,
part.
When you say you see a lot of baseball, is it just Giant baseball, or is it the A's too?
CSN locally for the Giant stuff, and then Fox for the network on the weekends for Saturday baseball. So I travel around a little bit on the weekend. I'm off this weekend, so next weekend I'll be in Houston. And then when the Giants come back home this week, I'll be there Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday before I leave for Houston.
So you basically do technical stuff.
I'm sorry, one more time? Couldn't hear you.
You basically do technical stuff behind the
Yeah, no, what I actually do is I work with the media relations people, and I kind of get it set up as if I'm going to be the play-by-play guy, and I'll do all the notes, and I'll skim through all the notes, and I'll do it like I'm preparing for it, and then I'll kind of be the liaison between the truck guys and the announcers. And so what that does is that allows me to be there like a few hours early and get everything done. And then basically when the game starts after the first or second inning, I'm done with work, and then I can go enjoy the game or go enjoy a cocktail or do whatever I want to do at that point. When I first started, I had a day job, and so I didn't want to stay at the ballpark till midnight every night, and then have to get up early in the morning. So when this opportunity came, and they said it was Fox that started this. Fox started this as opposed to every other network, where they were like, they want you to come in and do your thing, and then when you're done, your responsibilities are done as long as everything's all good. And 17 years later, the last 8 full time, they have not had one complaint that I've heard of anyway to me directly. So I guess I'm doing okay.
Do you keep them from what means do you keep from keeping them from complaining? Do you threaten their families or?
Yeah, I've got a lot of photos, Ralph. I mean, I'm
okay.
You know,
that'll do it.
Yeah, I have a lot of photos. I have a lot of stories. I have a lot of things going on.
All right. Well, you got to have something, Tim. You know, it's called an edge.
It's called leverage.
Right, leverage. And we're proud of you, Vasu, because any way you can keep a job in the United States of America these days.
Especially in the sports industry, for crying out loud.
People to choose from. Seriously, you must be terribly competent. What I want to know is, did you train for this job? Did you want to get into sports, particularly broadcasting? the industry? How'd you get into it? And then we'll talk about the
Well,
Giants.
I got into broadcasting as I played baseball for a year and a half at San Jose State in the late '80s before I got hurt, and I did campus radio at San Jose State. And San Jose State radio they've grown in leaps and bounds in terms of that station. I'm very happy to say I was part of the original sports broadcast in those days in the mid to late '80s. But their transmitter is so good that they go from south of Monterey all the way up to Marin County on 90.5. And I'm going to give them a little plug here and I did that because I didn't want to be a trainer. I just wanted to hang around my teammates. And I enjoyed broadcasting. I grew up in Southern California. We moved up before I started high school. Always loved Vince Scully. Always listened to Bob Costas, all the great baseball announcers. Announcing was kind of that thing, but I never really thought about getting into it, Ralph, until a college classmate of mine said, "Oh, we bought some time on this radio station in Monterey, and they wanted to have me come co-host it." And again, I still had a day job in those days, so they said, "Well, come down on Saturdays. We do the show from 8 to 10. Once in a while, I can stay over. The sponsors will pay for a hotel." And I said, "Oh, great." I had a girlfriend at the time. I'm like, "Okay, that sounds good. Night in Monterey on Saturday night with a girlfriend and doing a radio show. Life could be much worse, right?"
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Much.
And then after that radio show turned into a couple things with women's basketball. I first play-by-play stuff. I have done play-by-play. I did women's basketball. I did college football, college basketball for a few years here, off and on here and there. And then I did minor league baseball one year in the Midland, Texas, for that team.
Really?
I forgot who their major league affiliation was. I think it's the Angels. I think at that time in 2003 it was the Angels. They're not the Angels anymore. I heard recently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but in the 80s they were, and
no, this is 2002, Ralph. This is 2002. Don't date me too much here.
Okay, well, I date myself just by getting up in the morning. How old are you today, Ralph? I'm dating myself.
So anyway, so that's kind of how I got into it, and then Fox came along and kind of offered me this little gig, and it's been good, and I've been doing it on the side for years, and then until about 2008, when the last company I was with, they had a bunch of layoffs, and I said I'm going to go back in my MBA, and if I fall on my you know what, I'll have an MBA to fall on, and it'll be a softer cushion to land on.
Absolutely. You know,
knock on wood, it hasn't happened yet.
If you know who the most famous San Jose State alum is in the Bay Area.
In terms of every sport or just baseball?
Just if you think of just every sport.
Oh, in every sport, it's Bill Walsh.
Absolutely. Bill Walsh went there, and there was a college coach that went there along with Bill Walsh, who was a good associate. I can't think of his name.
I don't remember who that is, but I know Dick Vermeil was there too. Or you're thinking of Dick Vermeil?
Dick Vermeil went to San Jose.
Dick Vermeil, by the way, great winery up in Napa for Dick Vermeil. I've been up to his winery a couple of times. Very nice winery. If you like wine.
I guess you'll go up there and drink all day, won't you? Not think of Jimmy.
Oh, you know what? If we're gonna take that, then I'll tell you one other one. I walked into a winery about 5 years ago up there, and I think it's north of Napa, and I can't remember the actual city it was because we were drinking all day, Ralph and Tim, and so we were there. I walked in, I looked to my right. I looked to my right, and I said, "Oh, that's Tom Seaver." And sure enough, he got out of broadcasting after his days, and he opened up a winery north of Napa, I forgot the name of the city, but GTS Winery for George Thomas Seaver. And so he gave me a couple of bottles, and whenever the Giants call him to do some stuff, and I'm there, I'll run into him, and it's always good to see him. So I've got to know a few people, and I'm glad that I am in this business just to know.
Well,
a few people.
If you can put Tom Seaver and I together, that would be pretty cool. I was an original.
I know, New York Mets. I know. I had to throw that in there just for you. I want to make sure I get invited back sometime.
Well, you'll get invited back. You've got the charm. But you know why you're here. You may not know it. You're here to give you see the Giants on a very regular basis.
Yeah.
And you get all the game notes. You see what's going on.
Yeah.
You see what's going on from day to day. How do you rate this team this year? And what are your concerns? What are you happy with?
Well, I think they're a very good team this year. I think offensively, it seems like, and Tim probably follows them as well too. With his dad being with the organization, he probably still is a Giants fan after all these years. I grew up in Southern California as a Dodgers fan, and so when they play the 19 times a year, I go, well, at least the check clears I'm working. But as far as watching the Giants every year, as far as this year, their offense is 10 times better than it's been in the last 4 years. And I'm talking even the World Series years. Those World Series years, they were always looking for the clutch hit, which they got. But as far as this team, I mean, they're just pounding the ball. Granted, it's Colorado and Milwaukee that they played to start, but now they've beaten up on the Dodgers as well too last weekend, the 3 or 4 that they took from the Dodgers, and it should have been a sweep. That Saturday game should have been a win too if Tomlinson makes that double play ball in the ninth inning on Gonzalez. I think he either forgot who the runner was or the batter was, and he just gagged it and had to get the out, and then they end up losing the extra innings. But I think that they're a very good team. I'm still not sure about Johnny Cueto, but I love Jeff Samardzija, and I'm getting a lot of flack for him because he hasn't pitched like he has. It's only been 2 starts, but I think that Jeff Samardzija, and I really believe this, that Jeff Samardzija in the ballpark tonight with that sinker, he should win a lot of at least home games. He should win a lot of home games. And
his outing in
part of the Giants phone. The what?
Yeah, his outing in Denver was impressive. I thought to hold that club to runs was pretty impressive. I too, I'm a little bit more on the Samardzija bandwagon than I am Cueto at this point right now. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that the Giants offensively are a far more suitable group than they have been in past recent years.
As far as their offense goes, they're all swinging the bat. I'm sorry, Tim, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I just like the idea of having 2 leadoff hitters in a row, one batting ninth and one leading off, especially when you have a guy like Bumgarner in there who really swings the bat. We're looking at someone who could be the best hitting pitcher to come down the line in quite some time. And, this is National League. You help yourself by being a good hitter, and it's fun to watch from that standpoint. Any concerns about his arm, about his early start?
About Bumgarner's arm? Not really. I just think that sometimes when you start a season, it takes a little while to get into it. I mean, you can break it down from the standpoint of if you get to those good starting pitchers in the first 2 innings. Then you're in a better shape because once that 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th inning rolls around, they're rolling. It's tough to get on them, but early in the year, that first game against Milwaukee, he did walk a lot of guys, and that was a little concerning first. But again, it was only the first start, and they did come back to win. And then, of course, he gave up the runs early against the Dodgers. But they're 2-0 in his starts, and I guess that's the most important thing.
Good. Earlier in the week or earlier in the day, you know how things go in my head. I made a statement on Facebook that said something to the effect, in a reaction to a Bochy birthday baseball card being on there. I think it's his birthday.
It is his birthday. Today is his 61st birthday. I just heard that on the broadcast.
Happy birthday, Bruce. You're going to like what I have.
He's a good man. He's a good man, by the way. If you ever get a chance to meet him, he's a good man to go hang out and have a beer with. He's a great guy to hang out with.
Yes, a player's manager and a real good human being. And he gracefully got through the transition of having his son on the team for a while and then not having his son on the team for a while.
Right.
But that's walking some fine ice right there, and he handled that like a gentleman. But I made the statement that he is a virtual lock for the Hall of Fame as it stands now, and if the Giants win this year or next year or whatever, there's absolutely no question that he should be in the Hall of Fame, and they should take Rigetti with them. I want both your reactions. Tim, what do you think of that first?
Well, I absolutely agree as far as his managerial his history and what he's accomplished. I think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. There are very few guys that you can, really point to as far as the great achievements they've made as far as manager. But you said to bring who with him? Flannery or Righetti?
Righetti. I think he said Righetti.
It would be
I don't think there are a lot of. I really don't think there are a whole lot of pitching coaches in the Hall of Fame. Sorry, Ralph. I don't know.
I said Righetti, not Flannery, of course. It would
Right.
be much more fun to bring Tim Flattery with you wherever you're going. But from what I understand, I think Righetti's a hell of a pitching coach, and there are no coaches per se in the Hall of Fame. I think that's wrong. I think there are coaches. Johnny Sain comes to mind as one of the all-time great pitching coaches. Can't think of many others, but...
How about, well, that's the problem is nobody thinks of others. How about Leo Mazzoni?
Leo Mazzoni. When you're given that
years?
to oversee and manage or basically coordinate a pitching staff of Maddox and Glavine and the like, Leo Mazzoni.
But Righetti had to do. But they had to do it too. And I just think you still have to manage them and you still have to coach them. And I just think that I believe that guys like that are underrated. The coaches, the scouts, the bench coaches, the third base coaches, all the coaches. That's all the work in. The manager gets all the credit.
The minor league player development guys.
Your development guys, absolutely.
Yeah, the scouts.
There's one guy that went unstrung for quite a few years as well, and his name is Dave Duncan. I think he could be part of this conversation.
Totally. He should be. He should be right there too. They started him and LaRussa in those years, as you guys all remember, in the late '80s. They were the ones that started the starter for 7 innings, the setup guy, and the closer. Basically, before that, your closers were going 2 innings, and anybody else that was in the bullpen was somebody that wasn't good enough to start.
Exactly.
If you want to talk about coaches that could be in there, how about Charlie Law, the late great?
How about Charlie Law? Absolutely. He revolutionized the hitting approach. George Brett would not be where he was without Charlie Law.
Exactly. And I would even throw Jim Davenport into the mix as far as what the impression and the impact he made on young players, especially in the minor leagues. Jimmy Davenport's also a consideration for something like that.
Now let me ask you, Tim. Did your dad and him play together at that time in the 60s and 70s?
Yeah, they were teammates. And then, of course, later on, when Dad was an executive and GM with the Giants, he hired Dabby to manage the club. Unfortunately, that didn't work out very well. Yeah. But still to this day, the Davenports, our families are very close. As a matter of fact, this coming weekend, I'm going to be up in San Francisco for some functions regarding Davenport and the Giants. And I've made all my plans to get up there Thursday and go through the weekend. So, the Davenports and the Hallers, we have a history together.
Absolutely. Yeah, a history, no doubt about it. Like I said, I've been up here since high school. When I started high school, it was in the early '80s, and so I remember all those Giants days from the good, bad, and the ugly to the better and the good now. So, and the great now, actually, as it goes.
Memories of the Davenports and the Hallers together, probably before Timmy's memories, because Timmy, you don't remember 1962 very well, do you?
No, I was being put together in my mom's womb in the '62 series. So I was born in February of '63. So, but I have these odd recurrences of loud noises and fans yelling and organs playing, and it's the most bizarre thing.
I can imagine that you would. They put the bunting up at Candlestick. Now, what that meant to a transplanted team and their fans, I was back in New York, and the Mets had come in 1962, and I had been a Giant apologist since they moved in '57, and I rooted for the Mets, but I was really sad that Richardson's line drive or McCovey's line drive to Richardson wasn't just a little bit higher. I mean,
or even to the right or the left. I mean, it landed
to the left, exactly.
He went right through his glove.
So Tim might remember this. It's funny that you brought that story up because so just a little side note here on that. So in 1987, I was at an old-timers game, and they recreated the Yankees-Giants 62 World Series. And so they put McCovey at bat. They had the runners at second and third and everything like that. And so I'm not sure. I think it was right. Yeah, he was still alive. So he came back. Ralph Howe came back. And so what they did was all the fans were booing. They were going to recreate it. So what he did was he put 4 fingers up to walk him because he didn't want to see that happen. It was a hilarious moment because they let him pitch to him again, and I think he popped up. So
you know who was on deck?
Who was on deck? I don't know. I don't remember. It was Mays, wasn't it?
It was Cepeda on deck.
Oh, Cepeda, yeah.
And there was that chance. He did come out to the mound, and he asked him, "Do you want to walk Cepeda and pitch to McCovey, or do you want to walk McCovey and pitch to Cepeda?"
McCovey and pitch to Cepeda, right? Yeah.
And he thought, because Terry was a right-hander,
yeah,
it might have been the logical move. Terry wanted to pitch to him. He thought he could do better with McCovey, and he got him. You know, it's kind of a fluke, and that still stings because. You know, as much as when you're an original New York Giant fan and you went to the Polo Grounds in 1951 and saw the Giants before Willie Mays was called up as a 5-year-old, and then again later in the year after he was called up, you got some memories that don't go away just because the team moves, and they haven't to this day. But I also, living in the Bay Area, have some hooks with the A's too, and I have some feelings for them, and I have some empathy for them. And when Timmy and I started this, we named the show Bay Area Baseball, Past, Present, and Future. We don't give nearly enough homage to the A's, so I'm hoping that because you do get to see them on a semi-regular basis, you can give us an idea of how there's not only how this season is shaping up, but how some of the individual players are doing. I like their double play combination. I've been listening and watching them a little bit over the past few weeks. And Simeon and Lowry, who has a shortstop's arm at second base, I like. What do you like and what don't you like about the A's? Go down the line, if you would, Vasu.
Well, the first thing I like about the A's is I like their bullpen. They've actually gotten some guys. I actually was watching the game a little bit this afternoon, and they've got some veteran guys in the bullpen. And baseball's a different day and age now. You build your team from the 9th inning backwards, as opposed to the older days where you find your starters first. Because if you got somebody that can close out the game from the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning on, again, La Russa and Duncan were the originators of it, and then the Reds took it to a whole new level in that 1990 season. Ironically, coincidentally against the A's, it was Dibble, Myers, and Charlton, or Dibble, Charlton, and Myers. And if you didn't have a lead in the 6th inning, you were done that year in 1990. And so I think now the bullpen, I like Ryan Madison. I've always liked him. I thought he always had a good arm. His shoulder surgery has hurt him. Doolittle doesn't walk anybody. I think last year, I remember before he got hurt last year, I think I saw a stat where he had 50 strikeouts and 2 walks through the All-Star break. Now, if you're a reliever and you're coming in with Dan on, the last thing you want to do is walk the house full. And so if you got that kind of ratio, you're living right. So I think their bullpen starts off good. I like Billy Burns a lot as their leadoff hitter. I like Yonder Alonso. I always thought he was a good hitter, and he's developed as a first baseman since they moved him from behind the plate in San Diego. And they're just a bunch of scrappers. Stephen Vogt, they're just a bunch of scrappers, but they're not sure about all their starting pitching yet. But if you can get 5 or 6 innings out of your starter, that bullpen could be good. And they just went to Seattle and swept. They haven't had a good start at home, but they went to Seattle and swept Seattle 3 games in Seattle, which was not easy to do, especially with one of those games being Felix Hernandez. But they did a great job, and they're going to fight. That's the one thing about the Bay Area teams. I mean, you pick a sport, any sport. Every team that I've been around, whether it be baseball, football, basketball, hockey, they're all a bunch of scrappers. They're all a bunch of fighters, and they will not go away. They will not go down lightly. Let's put it that way.
And, just getting back to what we were talking about managers, and managers have to manage the players that they have, and even if they're good, maybe the manager doesn't get enough credit. There's also, this brought to mind while you were talking, there's also the dynamic between the manager and the general manager. So we're talking, and while you were talking, I'm thinking, well, wow, the A's have a great manager, but they also have a great general manager.
Sure.
And we never mentioned, we were talking about Bochy getting into the Hall of Fame. Brian Sabean has to be almost a lock for the Hall of Fame under the same circumstances, given some of the trades he made, getting Kent and what have you. Some of the much of what he did, what they did was put together by Sabean. So how important is it that the manager and the general manager get along? Maybe Tim can speak to this a little bit. What is it like? Not just your dad and Jimmy Davenport, but throughout baseball, how have you found the teammates, the ultimate teammates of manager and general manager to affect the game?
Well, that's an interesting question for me, Ralph, because I think it's essential, whether it's baseball or any other endeavor, that the guys that are at the top of whatever their position is, in this case a GM and a manager, and what their responsibilities and duties are there has to be some sort of cohesiveness. You got to get along. You got to kind of be on the same page. That's imperative. And I think in the case of the Giants, Sabean and Bochy, they had a great working relationship. Now, it comes to mind really just instantaneously is basically the Dipoto-Scioscia relationship down in Anaheim last season, where a lot of these newer GMs, and this is the part that I haven't wrapped my hands around yet, is a lot of the GMs and the executives now are so sabermetrically and statistically involved, and what they have to try to do is convey to their manager, with a statistical or a numbers thing as to what is maybe best as far as who you put out on the field any given night. So, in this day and age, it's a little different. I think that even just 10 years ago, you had a better working relationship between GM and manager. A lot of the GMs until the last 10 years or so are guys that actually even played. I think of guys like Gene Michaels and some guys that come to mind that actually played. They were in the game as players.
Oh, way back. Greenberg was a general manager. Throughout history, absolutely, guys. Howard was a manager for a while, and then became a general manager.
And a lot of these guys today, they're Harvard graduates. They're mathematical geniuses, and now they're trying to find this cohesiveness between the two different types of people. But it's still important that they have an open flow of communication and that they have a mutual respect for each other. And Brian Sabean never played, and he's one of those early sabermetric kind of guys, or one of those that doesn't have the experience, I guess, between the lines, that he devoted his life to working in the game of baseball. So he was always around the play, the game, and was able to see, the people, the guys playing the game. So that's why I think he's just been so extremely successful as well, because he's got that ability to, by vision, by eye test, he can see if the kid's going to make it or not, probably. as opposed to always looking at a sheet of paper with statistics on it. So,
talking to him and finding out what's in his heart, as opposed to just what's on how much
it's
is
interesting evolution. It's an interesting evolution today. It really is, and it's always going to be changing. Things will always change in the game of baseball. That's one of the things that I love about it. Vasu talked about it earlier about just how now the teams build their staff from the ninth inning back as opposed to their starting pitching forward. That's a whole pretty, relatively new concept in the history of the game. So baseball's always evolving. It's always changing. This year we're seeing a couple other managers batting who once was a leadoff hitter or a guy with some good speed and make good contact hitting in the 9 hole and putting your pitcher in the 8 hole. That's now becoming more of an in-practice thing. A lot of the defensive shifts, years ago they didn't do the full pull the infield around one side or the other to defend against the pull hitting batter. But, that's baseball. It's always changing, always evolving.
I agree. Totally agree. It's just the GM and manager dynamic is very important. I think there's a place for the numbers game in here, but you have to have some people. But baseball is a people business, and if you don't, the GM and the manager, they get most of the publicity and everything, but it's the scouts and it's the people that actually go see the kids, that actually go see the players. That's the part that happens because did you guys ever see the movie Trouble with the Curve? Which I thought was a good movie because it's a baseball movie. So that assistant GM, he never went out and saw him. He was just looking at numbers the whole time, and it ended up burning him in the end when the Clint Eastwood character would go out and see these guys down in the southeast where he was covering for the Braves. You have to see people, but nowadays with the way it's going and with the opportunity to see the numbers and see how people are, you can project. I think you can project. The way I look at it is you can project a little bit. You can project a little bit better than you could 25, 30 years ago, based on what you see. And so, therefore, I have a friend with the Cardinals who's a big numbers guy, and he pumps all this stuff through. And the analytics, I think, are fabulous. I actually study the analytics, and I think it's great, but it's a tool. It's not something that you need to go by 100% of the time.
What's your favorite news stat?
What's my favorite news stat? Well, that's not really a news stat.
Home runs, RBIs.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. My favorite news stat is 5 years ago and all this. And it's so funny about stats because I think all these stats were developed mostly because of fantasy sports. I think all these new stats came in because of fantasy sports, and now the teams are using it. There was a great article in ESPN the magazine a few years ago about a guy who was gambling on NBA games, and then the NBA teams heard about him using his numerology or his number theory, and 5 teams wanted to hire him as their GM because he was so good at predicting players. It's hilarious, that story, how it goes. But fantasy sports has been a big thing, and I think a lot of the numbers that have been developed from fantasy sports. But the last 5-6 years, the one that I like is the WHIP, because you can tell what kind of control a pitcher has, or how many runners per inning he has. And then the new one in the last few years that I read about was now they use it a lot is your batting average on batted balls in play for both the pitcher and for the hitter. Because if you're not a contact hitter, you don't factor in that thing. But what do you do? What do you do when the ball's in play? Are you driving in runs? Are you making contact? Are you moving runners along? What are you doing when the ball is in play? Because when you strike out, nothing happens. It's just a matter of what happens when the ball is in play. That's the key factor to me.
Gotcha. Yeah. How about you, Timmy? You have any favorite numbers that we would have been thinking about 10 years ago?
Well, the one, and I'm not a big sabermetrics guy at all. I really I get a little bit tiffed when I hear guys like Brian Kelly on MLB and his analytical approach to the game. And don't get me wrong, I do at times. I get a little bit snooty. because a lot of these people never played the game. They never strapped it on. And that's just my own ignorance, if you will, and my own arrogance as well. But the one stat that I think, for me, the one particular one that makes any sense and I can relate to it is the whip, walks and hits per 9 innings pitched. I like that. I think that's a good stat. It gives you a good idea of how many base runners a pitcher's allowing through the course of a 9 inning, of work, 9 innings of work. Some of the other ones I just don't understand. I just don't get it, and that's okay. I don't need to, and I don't necessarily want to, because I'm still very old school. I really am. Because you can have a guy that's hitting 200 in a playoff, who hit 200 throughout the course of the season, and be a very key contributor to the success in the postseason of a team.
Juan Uribe comes to mind for the Mets last year. He hit 219. He must have had 5 clutch hits down the stretch that got them into the World Series.
Right, and what happens?
I'm sorry, Ralph. I didn't mean to interrupt. I didn't hear who you said that was last year.
Juan Uribe.
Oh, Juan Uribe, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I'm thinking even guys like Brian. I mean, we're talking about like Yankees a couple of decades ago with Brian Denny, the little second baseman that had a tremendous.
What about 1985, Buddy Biancalana?
There you go. And here are guys that don't really factor into your overall picture or view of a club, but when you're looking at shortened series and they can have a great impact, but over a period of 162 games, they're not even that good. But you give them eight ball games or 6 ball games, and they can really. I mean, what about this guy that last year for the Mets, the second baseman that hit? Danny Murphy. Go figure.
Absolutely.
So, if these guys become obsessed over these statistics and these numbers, any guy that tells you that's been in the game or is in the game and they're managing or coaching, these guys, no matter what, have to pass an eye test. They've really got to know. And one thing that goes it's measured is the heart and the desire of a player. Those things can't be calculated. And when you're given, these guys, since they were little boys playing t-ball, have dreamt of having a situation where they're coming up in the bottom of the 7th with the tying or the winning run on second base, and there are 2 outs, and this might be their last opportunity to get to that place that they want to get. And here's his chance. Nobody can measure a dream. Nobody can measure the desire of a player.
No, you're absolutely right, Tim. That's the whole point. That's the whole point I was trying to make, is that I do think nowadays, because everybody's doing it, that the numbers have a place in the game. But I think when it starts getting to the point where it's overtaking the eye test and the scouts and everything like that. I mean, I grew up in a family of engineers, so numbers were all over me, and so I just applied it to sports instead of real world problems, or as even as the kids say now, first world problems, right? So I use them for what I use them for my job, because it's good for our broadcast, and it's good for it is good for measuring people, but you can't tell who people are unless you've seen them, and that's what the scouts, that's what the player development people are. That's who they are. That's what they do, and I can only imagine what it's like to go. I don't know if the Giants or anybody ever asked you to scout, and I never got asked to scout either. But can you imagine just going around to like Timbuktu or different cities to watch high school kids or college kids play?
Yeah,
because nobody's ever seen them.
Right, it's a thankless job, but it's critical and probably one of the most important facets of in any part of an baseball organization. One of the things that it always rings in my ears constantly is something that my dad taught me, and I'm a little prejudicial here when it comes to my dad, and I really think that he was the architect of the Giants minor league system when he was put in charge of the development in the mid and late 70s of the Giants. I think he was really the one that was the person to structure that whole system for the Giants. And of course, they've been able to grow from those initial ideas. But one thing my dad taught me, and it really applies to anything in life with an individual, what is their internal makeup? He called it intestinal fortitude. Somebody that has the ability to be able to take disappointment and grow from it. Or somebody that has the ability to say, this is not a fun, easy situation, but I'm going to get through it. I'm going to have the guts to walk through it. And those things, again, are incalculable. You can't put a formula to that, what a person's heart and desire. He would talk of pitchers especially because he was so connected as a catcher to the personality of a pitcher. And case in point, guy that rings close to me is a guy like Gaylord Perry. Gaylord, when he first came up, he had tremendous stuff, but and he threw pretty hard. But as his career went forward, he lost a lot of the velocity, and that's why he resorted to using or manipulating the ball in whatever capacity he possibly could.
Is that and one or did that actually happen?
That really happened. And the truth of it is, and why Gaylord was so great, is because he had something that nobody can calculate. And he had the heart of a lion. And he battled and he challenged guys. And those are things that you can't replace. You can't even teach that to people.
And that's we're talking about the Buddy Biancalancas and those guys that come through in the big situation, the big World Series, the Denny Doyles. I think that's who you were thinking of.
Denny Doyle, yeah.
Yeah, right.
No, Brian Doyle, the Yankees. Brian Doyle.
Yeah.
Well,
you're right.
Brothers. There was a couple of sweet brothers and back in those days.
Yeah, that was against my Dodgers. I'll never forget Brian Doyle hitting 400 against my Dodgers in 1978.
Right. Well, let me just tell you about Billy Martin in World Series situations between 1951, I think it was, when he came up, to like 53, 4, 5. This guy came up so big in the World Series. He made one spectacular catch where he darted across the infield when every other infielder lost the fly ball. He just came in, made this diving catch against Jackie Robinson, saved the World Series. Billy Martin was one of those guys that if you looked at the scrawny little bastard, you would say, this guy cannot be a hero. This guy cannot do it. And if you told him that, he would say, yes, I can. And
he would fight you for it.
No numbers can measure how a guy comes up big. He's a 250 hitter throughout his career in the big leagues. Comes up, if you look at his, I don't even know what his World Series batting average is. But if you look it up, I can tell you it was monstrous given the rest of it. So how do you scout something like that with just numbers?
You have Steve Young says, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ralph.
No, I want Tim to talk about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Tim's thing, part of the lion.
Yeah, the thing that these guys do, the scouts that are out there, they're employed by these organizations, they go and watch these guys play game after game after game. Of course they're going to be able to, rate them on their 0 to 5 scales or 0 to 8 scales, whatever they're using today.
Right.
But they're also going to be able to jot down their own personal opinions on what the guy's makeup is. And, that just goes, that speaks wonders for a guy's ability to be competitive and what he's going to be like in the dog days of the season. And if they get to the postseason, what kind of a person or personality is that going to be for the club when it comes down to championship time? And those things are just communicated. They're not really, there's no, like I said, there's no equation to formulate or put together that type of a thing. And that's why baseball is such a great sport, and that, you actually have to, that's why they play the game. I mean, you can go, let's say, for example, the Padres can go into Kansas City to play an interleague thing, and everybody in Vegas is going to say, well, the Padres are going to get shut out 3 games and get 8 hits in the 3 games or whatever. Well, that's why they play the game. So they could leave Kansas City having shut Kansas City out 3 games and winning, and scoring 18 runs in those 3 games. That's why they play the game. If everybody said, "Oh, they're just going to win, why bother? Let's not even go through the whole act of this." And I don't know. History repeats itself every year. Who would have thought that the Mets would have ended up in the World Series last year? The way they started out, the way they were, shaping up during the middle of the season, and something happened. They caught fire. And they got a couple of bats in their lineup, and a couple of guys got hot at the right time, and you have this tremendous starting pitching, and it carried them through the World Series. So that's why they play the game.
Hey, Timmy, you mentioned your dad and building the minor league system with the Giants. I want to take my hat off to Jack Hyatt and Dickie Dietz along those lines. They played hard. Am I right?
Yes, they did. And, those are guys that go unsung. I know Jack Thompson was the guy that signed my dad. He, these guys, and these scouts and guys that sign these players, they never get recognized. I mean, they have an annual banquet and fundraiser and function every year now for the scouts, but they're the guys that are really in the trenches. They're the ones that are, wearing the plaid slacks to these, single A league,
no doubt about it,
and go up to high schools in the middle of Arkansas and Tennessee to go to find that diamond in the rough. And they're the unsung heroes of baseball. Absolutely.
And if anybody wants to read a book about how the best book on baseball scouting I ever read was a book called $sign on the Muscle. And it came out in the mid-'70s, maybe early '80s. And I can't, off the top of my head, think of who wrote it. But if you want to look at that out there, anybody out there interested, a wonderful world of scouting and player development, and more scouting than player development in this book. It's out there, and it's available, I'm sure. So, hey, you guys have been terrific tonight. Vasu, thank you for guesting. I hope you had fun.
Thank you very much. I look forward to coming back on again. Tim, nice to talk to you. Nice to meet you. Hopefully I'll get a chance to talk to you again sometime.
Beautiful. Tim, every week's a joy with you, as it were. Timmy? Tim Howell.
I think you dropped off, Ralph. Tim out.
Huh?
All right, Ralph, thank you very much. I appreciate the time. I look forward to talking to you again very soon, okay?
All right. I'm going to end the show the way I always do. Thank you again, Vasu. And Timmy, it was great. When you play this back, you see that we didn't cut you off. Technology has its downside. Till next time, everybody, keep them flying.